What's going on, champs and champions? It's FireMonkey here, and just yesterday we had a brand new balancing hotfix update released for Battle Royale and Zero build. So in today's YouTube video, I'll be going in detail about all the nerfs, the buffs, and everything in between that you should know about this hotfix update, and just talking about all of it in a way that shouldn't be too confusing. I know it can go very statistical or whatever else, being like, oh yeah, this got moved by 0.37 to each decimal point or whatever, but I'm going to try making it a little bit more understandable, so let's just go ahead and start it off by talking about some nerfs that actually happened with the new update. Firstly, since I have it in my inventory right now, I feel like it's the best thing to actually showcase to you guys, but we actually had a nerf to the snowball launcher. As you can see in the bottom right, we have 4 actual snowballs in the magazine before you have to actually reload the snowball launcher, which doesn't actually even match the model. If we go ahead and look at the model right here, you can see 1, 2, 3. On the right side, you got 1, 2, 3 as well. Did something just pass right by here? I can't even tell. But despite it actually having, the model supporting 6 different ammo slots for snowballs, it only has an ammo count of 4 now. It used to be 6, and then they decided to hotfix it and make it an ammo count of 4. Other than that, there hasn't really been any changes to the snowball launcher, but it is one of the things that they've kind of done last minute that, I was kind of confused by. It feels a little weird, and it makes the weapon feel, like its rarity as it is right now, where, you can't really find it too often unless you go to an NPC, makes it not the best weapon. And then in terms of another nerf, we actually had a sneaky snowmando item you were able to buy from the Holiday Leela NPC that has been removed and actually vaulted from the NPC's selling data, because unlike the normal sneaky snowmando, which you have right here where you're able to throw down 5 of them, it slowly recharges over time, that version of it had basically no recharge at all. It was basically you just throw it down non-stop, just do without having to worry about a thing. So they went ahead and patched that out, and you're no longer able to continue throwing around the NPC snowmandos that you find in games as much as you want. The normal ones you can still use, they still have their cooldown and everything else, they're still infinite, but they're not as infinite as the other one that got disabled. And then another nerf is the Reaper sniper rifle. This sniper rifle has had its spawn rate lowered by around 42%. It can still be found, pretty commonly from things like supply drops, but at the same time, it still won't be as commonly found from the supply drops as it was before this hotfix. So overall, you're going to be seeing the Reaper sniper rifle a lot less in your games, regardless of, if that's a good change or a bad change. I know some people are going to really enjoy it. Some people are going to really hate that change, especially trick shotters. So we just kind of got to see how this balancing affects the actual loot pool, how it affects everything else, and if it needs a little bit more tinkering here and there. But of course, since this has been out for around a day now, I would love to hear in the comments down below, especially not just for the sniper rifle, being a lot rarer, but all the changes overall. How do you feel about how the game is currently balanced? Some other actual nerfs that actually happened here is the Striker assault rifle has actually had a damage nerf. Now it does 1 damage less per rarity. So for example, for common, instead of doing 24 damage at point blank range, you'll now do 23 damage. That doesn't include headshots or whatever else. And then the mythic version, instead of doing 30 damage at point blank, it now does 29. Now the further you are away from enemies and all that type of stuff, the less damage you're actually going to be able to output. So keep in mind that if you see like slightly smaller numbers or whatever else, that is just because there's a lot of different things that go in there. But the main stats is basically, hey, each rarity got its weapon damage with the Striker assault rifle decreased by 1. And then for the next actual hotfix, we have to talk about something that in my opinion was the wildest thing to see them actually do, and it all relates to medallions. As you guys know, there's 5 medallions you're able to collect in game. Even in the menu right here, you have the actual slot for 5 of them, and it was a pretty powerful item, right? Whenever you had it, there was a little circle that showed people around the radius of where you were. That circle got smaller depending on how many medallions you had, and now it's one of the items that I kind of fear using in normal lobbies, because just the other day when I was actually playing some normal lobbies, hitting the Buddy Holly vocals whenever I eliminated someone just to mess with them, I was having a situation where it felt like if I had a single medallion, I was just a target. I just had a target on my back, like, after the update, after this hotfix, where it felt like everyone knew my exact location, not, in that general location that we had before with the circle radius, but the exact location I was at all times, even with just 1 medallion equipped. And to kind of explain all the changes they've done here, they've made it so that the actual circle, whenever you have a medallion, is 60% smaller and 40% more accurate. So right when you get your first medallion, it is not going to be that massive circle covering, a big distance of the map. Instead, it's going to be a very, very small one that is only going to get smaller and smaller as you collect more, and it's going to be something that makes it risky to even just have 1 medallion actually equipped on you. On top of this, they nerfed shield regeneration. So firstly, if you actually take damage from any source, that shield regen the medallion would give you would stop for 3 seconds now. Before it was just constant, non-stop, even if you got shot at, which was a nice little benefit of it. But you know, this little balancing thing I feel is an okay one. You know, I don't have any gripes about it. But then the other ones come into play, and it's a very wild situation. So now the shield regen cap has been lowered, and if you're someone who actually has one medallion, it will only regen up to 50 shield. If you have 2 medallions, it goes up to 60, 3 goes up to 70, 4 goes up to 85, and then if you have all 5 medallions, you can finally go back to the normal 100 shield gain from them. On top of this, they made the regen rate of the shield lower, meaning that if you have 1 medallion, it's not going to regen as fast anymore. If you have 2, it'll be slightly faster, up and up and up until you have all 5 medallions, to which you'll have the pre-hotfix regen rate. But of course, you know, even if you have all 5 medallions, you gotta keep in mind that circle is still going to be 60% smaller, 40% more accurate, and it's also going to have the whole entire shield regen system where if you take any damage, you have to wait 3 seconds of not taking damage before your shield starts regenerating at all. So I definitely think that when it comes to medallions, even though, you know, I'm not a crazy player who's, you know, out here trying to grind out and, you know, go in normal lobbies, collect all of them, it feels like even if you can get 1 in the game, that paints a massive target on your back to the point where you'll start getting third-partied by basically everyone. And I mean, you know, I'll be in the early stages of the game, there'll be like half the lobby still alive, and you'll just see a giant circle of medallion user with medallion user with medallion user. It was just like 4 circles inside of each other because of how everything is, and it just feels very chaotic. So I wonder if they're going to try balancing it more in the future, you know, buffing it a little bit more, in my opinion, is what they need to do, while keeping some of the righteous, you know, actual justified nerfs that they've done that actually, you know, kind of make it a little bit interesting, right? You know, like for example, the whole entire situation where you have the whole entire like 3-second delay before you can actually start gaining medallion. Oh, I'm on fire. Okay, get me out of here. But when you have the 3-second delay before you actually start gaining the medallion health, I feel like that's a fine one, right? I have no complaints about it, but I feel like, you know, especially the circle radius and the actual cap of shield should get a little bit more of a buff because it just feels too risky at this point to actually take a medallion. And as you can see right here, this is with 1 medallion going up to 50 shield. You can see how slow the regen rate is now. It still is a decent amount of regen, but it is nowhere near as fast as it was pre-update, and it will only go up to 50 shield. So once we have 50 right there, as you can see with 1 medallion, it is not going to actually go up any further than that. So that kind of, you know, is a great way to actually visually see how that change affects the game. But after that, you know, it's time to go to the buff territory, and we have some pretty interesting buffs. So firstly, the ballistic shield, which is one of the new weapons from the season, has had a buff to the pistol damage. Instead of doing 18 damage, it will down do 19 damage per shot. Of course, it might be a little bit lower or higher depending on how you're shooting enemies, but it is a nice little buff to see. So, you know, it's had its damage increased by 1, making it a more effective item to use in game. And I mean, who doesn't love running around with a giant riot shield just bashing into all the walls and everything else nearby? We also have had some slight changes to the shield breaker EMPs, which is an item introduced to the game a long time ago. This actual buff that they went ahead and did was made it so instead of it doing 70 shield damage, it now does 80 shield damage. I've seen some people when they heard that be like, whoa, 80 damage? That is a pretty high margin. So, you know, it's a little bit of a 50-50 area where we're not for sure if this is going to be the best change for that weapon, or if it's something that, you know, is understandable, you know, makes the weapon just a little bit more useful whenever you're trying to break an enemy shield without having to worry about throwing them down too much, right? I mean, at the same time, you know, you still have to use 2 of those in order to get a full shield break on an enemy, but it does mean that there's less you actually have to throw down in order to, you know, for example, throw 1 and then shoot them normally to get their shield broken. So, you know, maybe it's a little bit of a buff there. Now, another thing you may have noticed is that when we were using flow berries earlier in this video, they actually gave us 15 shield. That is because they've gone ahead and increased it from giving you 10 shield per use to giving you 15, which I think is a pretty nice buff to actually see to flow berries, because they've just kind of been buffing those over time, right? They made the gravity last longer, and now they're making the shield give you a little bit more. In terms of other things, you know, if we're talking about damage here, the Ranger pistol has had its damage increased by around 1 damage per rarity, or around 2 for some rarities. It's a little bit finicky, right? You know, it's like common rarity went up by 1, but you have things like uncommon, which actually went up by 2 damage, so, you know, it's basically around 1 to 2 2 to 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 2 shots more effective. So for example, if you're using the common one, you'll now do 24 damage, you know, it could be a little bit more. So, you know, it's basically around 1 to 2 shots more effective. So for example, if you're using the common one, you'll now do 24 damage, you know, it could be a little bit bit lower, a little bit higher, depending on how far or close you are to an enemy. But now if you use, for example, like the mythic version, which isn't even enabled in the game, you could do as high as 31 damage per shot, which I definitely think is a pretty good nerf, or I guess not nerf, but buff to see them actually include in the game. Other than that, the only real change we had with this update was the Thunder Burst SMG, which is this SMG right now. You know, the burst shotgun, actual effect, whatever else. Not shotgun, SMG, but the magazine size has been increased, so now if you're using a normal mag, it has 27 bullets instead of 24, and if you're using the drum mod magazine, it has around 36 bullets instead of around 33 to 34 like it originally had. So basically you have more shots you're able to actually do with this SMG before you have to reload it, which I do think is definitely an interesting choice, and I kind of agree with the buff in my opinion, because it just makes the weapon more effective in its own ways. So with that said, I hope you champs and champions enjoyed today's YouTube video. If you did, consider subscribing and support the content I create, and I will catch you guys tomorrow with another upload about all the glorious things in the magical world of Fortnite. So peace out.